Number 1.
Christopher was last seen in Bath, Michigan on April 22, 1990. On that day, Christopher had a few celebrations to attend along with his friends. After they attended the annual Earth Day festival at Riverfront Park, Christopher and his friends went to the Rose Lake Recreation Center. They planned to camp there for the night. They arrived at the site at approximately and made a campfire. Then, at 9 p.m., Christopher walked into the surrounding woods. He never returned to the campsite and was never seen or heard from again. His friends became concerned when he didn't return 4 hours later. They called his parents, who promptly filed a missing persons report on him. Police arrived at the recreation shortly afterwards and began to search for Christopher with dogs to no avail. They also had a helicopter search the area at 3 a.m. In total, they searched 2 square miles of land, but no trace of Christopher was found in the area. Investigators originally classified Christopher as a runaway, and the investigation halted. Christopher's parents, John and Ronnie, have stated they do not believe their son ran away, and said it would have been out of character for him to do such a thing. They said they knew of no serious problems that Christopher had at the time of his 1990 disappearance. It should be noted that Christopher doesn't even have a driver's license or a car, and was driven to the camping area by one of his friends. He did know how to drive in 1990, however. John also stated Christopher was aware of the fact that he could simply call him to come and pick him up. He's picked Christopher up from places in the early morning hours on several other occasions. Investigators and his family and others believe other factors are to explain for Christopher's disappearance. His family and a teacher, Marilyn Newman, said he was somewhat too trusting and would have been an easy victim. Christopher was known to regularly smoke marijuana and even sold a bit on the side. He had a history of shorting his clients. Some have suggested that this is a likely reason for someone to possibly harm Christopher on the night of his disappearance. Some of his old friends are baffled about his whereabouts that night. Apparently, there were other bigger parties that Christopher had been personally invited to. The area he and his friends were camping at was rarely visited by anyone from his school. Investigators continued to search for Christopher after 4 days without him returning past. A second search from the air occurred, and Christopher's friends searched the ground of the camping area. They even searched a nearby lake with no signs of him. John and Ronnie did so much to try and find their lost son. They hired a private detective, offered a $2,500 reward, and even consulted a psychic through a suggestion a friend of his made. Their efforts turned up nothing of interest in the case. The case turned cold very quickly and little to no leads developed in the case. However, a year and a half after Christopher went missing, one of his shoes was discovered in a boggy area about 300 yards southwest from his last known location. The shoe was found by 2 hunters, and the area was described as being full of marshland by locals. A detective even said that just stepping in the mud would sink you to your armpits in a heartbeat. He described it as life-threatening. Christopher's other shoe was found a few weeks after the first one was discovered. However, investigators also discovered handfuls of long, strawberry, blonde-colored hair just 100 yards away from the shoe. The hair did not belong to Christopher, but it made investigators curious. The shoes appeared to have been exposed to the elements for a long time, but the first shoe was found in an area that had already been searched. Investigators believe Christopher's remains might still be in the area that he went missing from. The area was described as swampy along with the marshland that his shoe was found in. It would have been easy for someone to hide his body in the area without it being found in 1990. At the time of his disappearance, Christopher was described as a bright student who was 2 weeks shy of graduating high school. He was student at Haslett Community Education, where he was said to have a perfect attendance and made great marks in his grades. He was originally enrolled at East Lansing High School, but was transferred in November of 1989 to Haslett. John and Ronnie felt he would benefit from the smaller class sizes and greater individual attention that was present in the classroom. He was known to enjoy swimming and doing handwork in 1990. He was also described as soft-spoken and generous. Christopher's case remains unsolved, and foul play is highly suspected in the case.
Number 2.
Andrea was last seen in Port Salerno, Florida on July 11, 1993. Her mother, Linda Parsons, left the house with Andrea in the morning and dropped her off at the gates of the B&A flea market, located on US 1. While at the market, Andrea helped a 19-year-old friend, Cheery Tate loft boxes. Tate ran a booth where she sold clothing, jewelry, as well as assorted household items. Tate said she was close with Andrea and that she was always helpful a lot with things at the booth. Andrea was described as being happy and didn't seem unusual that day. In fact, the highlight of her day was when she noticed a woman walking 3 pit bull puppies, and she apparently begged to cuddle one. She also bought a gold-plated unicorn necklace and automobile air freshener from the market. Linda picked Andrea up from the flea market at approximately 2:40 p.m., and she surprised her mother with a gift she purchased. They then went home where they carved a watermelon in the backyard. Andrea then went to her bedroom to take a nap while her mother got ready for her night shift at Winn-Dixie, a deli she worked at. When Linda began out the front door, Andrea rushed to the driveway where she opened the door to the family's white station wagon. After her mother got in the car, Andrea gave her a goodbye kiss and she left. Andrea went inside the trailer home due to the hot weather outside. Her mother's boyfriend, Pat Daniels, was watching the colored television. At some point, Andrea left the home with her roller skates and went to a neighbor's residence to skate with a 3-year-old girl, Latonia Jones. They skated for 5 minutes before Latonia's mother, Jennifer, called her inside. She said it was too hot out that day for them to be skating that long. She returned to her own home where Daniels was still watching television. He stated that he was watching a nature program show and that Andrea seemed to be bored and uninterested in it. She asked permission at 5:30 p.m. to go to the neighborhood grocery store and then to a friend's home. He said she could do both, and she left the home at approximately 5:45 p.m., according to her neighbors. Andrea stopped at the Jones house and asked if Latonia could accompany her to the store. Jennifer said no, and she later said she felt Andrea was too young to have her daughter go with her. While walking along Commerce Avenue, Andrea waved to her mother's co-worker, Mary Timmerman. She then apparently cut across the parking lot of Port Salerno Grocery. This store was dubbed by locals as Buc-ee's. While at the store, Andrea purchased 2 bags of potato chips and some penny candy which she paid for using change that Daniels had given her before she left. A cashier, Sue Solomon, recalled that it was odd for Andrea to be there alone. She was usually accompanied by her older sister, Nikki, but she was visiting relatives in Tampa, Florida at the time of Andrea's disappearance. Andrea left the store and was seen walking at 6 p.m. She apparently waved to a couple that she knew. Andrea never arrived to her friend's house and was never seen or heard from again. Daniels told police he became worried about Andrea after it started to become dark and she hadn't returned. The family did not have a telephone, and Daniels didn't have access to a car, so he began scouring the area on foot for her. Linda left work at exactly 10:10 p.m. and came home to find Andrea missing. She too was hysterical and worried and got into her car and began looking for her daughter. She stalked people along the street and went to the homes of Andrea's friends, but found no evidence of her daughter's whereabouts. Linda called the police at 11:06 p.m. after she was unable to locate her daughter. Police and investigators searched the neighborhood but found no trace of Andrea. They did question Linda and Daniels. He was initially considered a suspect in Andrea's disappearance, and investigators looked inside the trunk of the dark blue Chevy they drove when they moved to Florida for Andrea. Daniels recalled how the agents who questioned him tried to get a reaction out of him by toughening up what they said. They threatened to have the state take his daughter, Nikki, away from them. Daniels was an unemployed construction worker, and he had a few run-ins with the ALE before Andrea's disappearance. He did serve prison time for auto theft in 1991 in Nebraska. By 1993, Daniels was attempting to get his life back together since he had reconciled with Linda. He thought of Andrea as his own daughter, and she even called him Daddy. Daniels and Linda were quickly cleared as suspects in the case, and investigators believe something more sinister might have happened to Andrea during the evening she disappeared. Her disappearance caused a massive search that went beyond her neighborhood area. Highly trained were used to sniff through thickly wooded lots and along the surfaces of drainage ponds. Divers, helicopters, and infrared sensors were used to search areas of land and water, but they never located any trace of Andrea's whereabouts. Searchers mainly concentrated on an area located just north of Parsons' residence. The area was said to include an industrial park, a condominium complex which was under construction, as well as extensive stretches of woods and fielded areas. They also searched the railroad tracks near Dixie Highway, as well as Mosquito Creek and Manatee Pocket. None of these searches ever yielded any clues as to where Andrea could be. Investigators believe Andrea was probably abducted by someone she didn't know. Her disappearance is classified as a non-family abduction. On July 15, a local man named Claude Davis went to the police station and told investigators that he witnessed Andrea's abduction. Davis claimed that he saw 4 to 5 men driving in a battered Oldsmobile follow Andrea as she walked home from the store. The car apparently stopped along a wooded lot approximately 25 yards away from her home. Davis described a 200-pound man get out of the backseat of the car and forcibly grabbed Andrea before pulling her into the vehicle. The vehicle allegedly drove away with Andrea in the backseat. He claimed that Andrea did not struggle or scream at her supposed abductors, but rather just looked surprised when she was grabbed. Investigators searched for the car. The car is described as a 1970s or early 1980s Oldsmobile, with a beige or light gold body and a black top. The car's right front fender was dented, and its headlamps apparently didn't match. The men in the car were deceived as being Hispanic. Investigators hoped the public would help in identifying the alleged perpetrators, but nothing ever came in. They kept the tip private from the new media for a week at the request of Davis. For months, investigators had no leads as to who took Andrea, but they were certain she was the victim of a stranger abduction. Then on November 16, 1993, Davis told investigators he had a dream in which Andrea was killed by an accidental fall from a trash bin. He allegedly said he put her body in another bin at Phipps Park. Investigators took the dream as facts. They charged Davis with false imprisonment in relation to Andrea's presumed abduction and murder, and had his bail set at $250,000. Davis lived across the street from Parsons in 1993, but he did not know Andrea before her disappearance. They began searching Davis's home and van 2 days after the charges were brought against him. Investigators began searching the Martin County landfill in December of 1993. They were looking for Andrea's body at the time, but after extensive searching, they found nothing. That same month, a detective at Davis's bail reduction hearing testified that Davis told a neighbor about abducting and killing Andrea. On April 14, 1994, Davis was released from Martin County Jail after pleading no contest to molesting a 14-year-old girl. Davis was actually sentenced 9 years in prison in 1999 for violating his parole by contacting his victim. Davis would go on to claim that his story about Andrea's accidental death was untrue and that the account regarding the several men taking her was true. In fact, the porch of his residence was burnt down in April of 1994. He claimed that the person responsible for Andrea's demise. He has refused to take a lie detector test. On May 25, 1994, a judge dismissed the charge of false imprisonment due to lack of evidence and because prosecutors failed to take Davis to trial within the time that was permitted by Florida's speedy trial law. After this, Davis could no longer be charged or touched in the case. He was always considered the primary suspect for almost 2 decades. On November 29, 2012, Martin County authorities arrested a man named Chester Price and charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping of a child under the age of 13 in relation to Andrea's case. Price was allegedly acquainted with the child at the time of her disappearance and also knew and was good friends with Davis at the time. Accounts vary as to how exactly Andrea ended up in a car with Davis and Price. Some agencies stated that she asked for a ride and got into the car, or that she was enticed with a job offer. Others indicate that both men forcibly abducted her and placed her in Davis's 1978 van. According to Davis's testimony against Price, he heard a commotion in the back seat between the child and Price. Price allegedly attempted to kiss Andrea, and she bit him extremely hard. She also kicked and screamed and fought for her life and her escape from Davis and Price. It's unknown how exactly she died, but authorities believe that Price and Davis either killed her with a tire iron or that Price punched her hard in the head which killed her. Davis claims that this is what happened and that he attempted to revive the child, but to no avail. Davis cooperated completely and went as far as revealing his own role in the kidnapping and murder. He cannot be criminally held accountable for Andrea's disappearance, as it would violate his right to a speedy trial. The state had a 175-day time gap to file formal charges against him during his false imprisonment charge. They did not find any evidence against him at the time and were forced to release him as a result. Davis claimed that he and Price left Andrea's body inside the van until a day after her abduction and death. They allegedly drove Andrea's body to a remote area near State Road 710, since there was a huge response and fraction search underway for Andrea. He claimed that he dug a hole and placed her body in it. He also apparently covered her with a black garbage bag and a piece of burlap to keep the dirt from going in her face. He covered her body up and said a prayer. He told investigators about the burial spot, but they couldn't find Andrea's remains there. Both suspects also claimed her body was buried on Martin Grade, but that location was searched to no avail. A man named Billy Philip Brewer, 38, rose with Price and Davis the day after Andrea went missing as they looked for aluminum cans. Brewer testified in 2012 that he remembered seeing a large object inside of a black garbage bag. Investigators have been unable to locate Andrea's remains despite many search efforts. Claude Davis passed away from natural causes on July 2, 2013. He apparently died in his home and was 76 years old at the time. Davis's sudden death was said to have seriously compromised the death case against Chester Price, since it solely relied on Davis's testimony against him. Despite this, Price pleaded not contest to charges of manslaughter and kidnapping of a child under the age of 13. He served approximately 3.5 years of a 10-year sentence. After serving his prison term, Price signed an agreement in which he will be involuntarily committed to sexual offender treatment under the Jimmy Rice Act. Jimmy was abducted from Florida in 1995 and was later found murdered. His case created an act which allows possible re-offenders to be held in treatment. Linda and the Victims' Right organization is attempting to prove that Price and Davis abducted Andrea for their own sexual satisfaction. At the time of Andrea's disappearance, she had just finished 4th grade at Port Salerno Elementary School. She was attending summer school to get help for mathematics. The school was within walking distance, but her mother always drove her and picked her up every day. Andrea originally lived in Dayton, Ohio, and moved to the area in September of 1992. Andrea has an older half-brother who lived in Dayton with his father, Larry Howard, at the time of her presumed abduction. Andrea's mother met Daniels after she divorced him 15 years earlier and had Nikki with him before Andrea was born. They separated after Nikki's birth. Linda then married Garland Parsons, who was a tugboat member in Texas. He was Andrea's biological father. Linda and Garland divorced and he died of a heart attack in 1991. The divorce was finalized shortly after that. Linda reconciled with Daniels and they exchanged letters while he was in prison. They moved to Florida where he lived on and off for years. Linda and Daniels were absolutely devastated over her disappearance. Andrea's remains have never been located. Foul play is suspected in her disappearance, and some agencies may classify her as endangered missing. Her mother is still alive and hopes to locate Andrea and unseal her fate.
Number 3.
Danette was last seen with her fraternal twin sister, Danette, in Augusta, Georgia on March 18, 1990. According to reports, the two sisters went to a local restaurant called Church's Chicken for lunch. They then returned to their family's apartment located in the 1800 block of Cooney Circle off Olive Road. Once they got there, they reportedly told their mother, Mary, that they saw a man in a van following them for part of their walk. The incident didn't seem to faze them as they walked to their godfather's home later in the day, in order to borrow money, so they could take a city bus to school the following week. They had to take the bus since the twins had recently moved apartments, and their new one was farther away from school. After they received $20 from him for the bus, and a little extra money for snacks, they left. The twins then went to their cousin's house, and asked her to walk home with them. Their cousin's mother would not allow her to do so since it was almost dark outside. They then made a stop at their older sister's home, and stayed at the residence for approximately 15 minutes and they asked her as well to walk with them. She declined the request, since she had recently given birth. They both went to a local pump and station gas station located on the corner of 12th Street and Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. There, they bought chips, candy, and soda. The clerk who worked at the store, Gloria, knew nothing of the sisters and said they appeared normal at the store. She was the last confirmed person to see them both alive. The girls never returned home and were never seen or heard from again. Their family attempted to file a missing persons report when they discovered them missing initially, but were told to wait 24 hours before calling. Not much is known about the original search for the missing sisters, because for unknown reasons, the girls' names and information was removed from the National Missing Children's Registry. In addition to that, the missing persons case was closed, and the original investigative files were lost over time. There have been many explanations as to why the case was originally closed. Their family stated that the police told them the case was closed because the girls had reached 17 years of age. They stated user the age, the girls didn't have to be legally returned home. The original investigators who looked into the case claimed a juvenile case officer told him that both girls had been located. He said this is what led to the case being closed in 1991 and their removal from the missing persons database. The family was adamant on finding out where the two girls were despite the case being closed in 1991. They continued to call regarding the girls' whereabouts for years. The family was apparently given many excuses regarding the closing of the case. One of these reasons was that the girls had been removed from the home and placed in foster care before eventually being adopted into another family. Investigators have since discovered this to be false. A relative of the two sisters had children in foster care and the family believes this to be the source of the confusion with that lead. The family's calls to bring the girls home ultimately led to their decades-old case being reopened in 2013. The police stated that a terrible injustice occurred for the past 2 decades and that it has fueled their interest to find both girls and bring them home to their family. Investigators have no explanation as to how both girls disappeared. The family and investigators do not believe either girl ran away. They had no history as runaways, and neither girl had any behavioral issues. There was one instance where the girls got in trouble at a busy stop because one of the twins was being bullied. They also had no motive for running away. Investigators believe it's likely the girls met with foul play on the evening of their disappearance. Investigators have considered the possibility that serial rapist and murderer Joseph Patrick Washington was possibly involved in the twins' missing persons case. He worked at a brickyard in August, which was not far from where the girls lived, and he would have had to drive on the same road they lived on to get to and from his job. Washington was known to drive 3 vehicles, but none of Tennessee were vans like the van that was following the twins earlier on the day of their disappearance. He would have had access to more types vehicles since he worked in transporting in the brickyard. He was known to attack women in the early 1990s. He preferred young black women who ranged from their teens to their 30s and had short hair. Both Danette and Jeanette got his victim description, and they disappeared when he was active in the area. He was said to abduct his victims and take them to another location where he would shoot them in the stomach and rape them. Some of his surging victims claimed that he would hold his shirt up with his teeth so it wouldn't get blood on it. He would reportedly tell his victims that he received an HIV from his ex-girlfriend and that the rapes were his way of seeking revenge against women. He was sentenced to 17 consecutive life sentences in 1995 for several kidnappings which took place between 1991 and 1993. He was additionally found guilty of sexually assaulting 5 women. He apparently shot 3 of these women, but they survived. Washington was also going to stand trial for the murders of Marilyn Denise Kelly and Loretta Dukes. Both women were murdered in 1991. He was also a primary suspect in the 1991 murder of another woman. He was never indicted in that case due to lack of evidence. He died in 1999 before he could stand trial. He is believed to have passed away from AIDS-related causes. On January 25, 1993, the skeletal remains of a young woman were discovered in Aiken County, South Carolina. The decedent was described as being an African-American female. The victim is described as being between the ages of 25 and 32, and she stood between 5'43" and 5'73". She also weighed approximately 125 to 140 pounds. Investigators narrowed down her time of death to between 1987 and 1992. Investigators believe she may have been a victim of Washington due to her description and her time of death. She is believed to have been the victim of a homicide. The Millbrook family believes the facial reconstructions of the victim resembles Jeanette and have given their DNA to be tested against the remains. Results of the testing has not been released yet as the DNA was given in 2017. At the time of their disappearance, the sisters were both 9th grade students at Lucy Laney High School in 1990. They were both described as well-behaved teenagers with no history as troublemakers. Mary and their sister Shanta have both been active in searching for the girls and hope to bring them home. Their cases remain unsolved and foul play is suspected.
Number 4.
Esther was last seen in Chama, New Mexico on September 7, 1984. After school that day, Esther and her best friend, Cindy Garcia, went to the Branding Iron restaurant, where they worked as dishwashers and picked up their paychecks, and they then drank whiskey that they persuaded someone to buy for them. They also went to visit the grave of Esther's deceased baby sister who died several years before 1984. She and Garcia went during the night. At the grave, Esther told Garcia how she was tired of hurting her mother and father, and how much she loved them. They then ended up with other friends at some point that night. Garcia stated she left Esther talking with a man. At approximately midnight, Esther returned to Garcia's home with an older man. They both invited Garcia to go camping with them, but she refused, and Esther left with the older man in his Bronco. She was never seen or heard from again after this. A few days after Esther went missing, her wallet was found in Chama. Garcia states she knew the man that Esther was last seen with, and she saw him the following Sunday after Esther's disappearance. She asked him where she was, and he claimed that he left Esther at Garcia's house. She reportedly got into an argument with the man 4 days after she saw him, and she knew his statement about leaving Esther at her home was a lie. The man then said, "It wasn't me. I wasn't the one that killed her." She went to police with what he said, but they didn't seem to believe her statements, and the man soon moved to Texas. Investigators have also considered that Esther's disappearance might have had something to do with her testimony in the trial of a bar owner, as she was due to appear as a witness at the trial. The owner had been cited for allowing Esther into Ben's lounge when she was underage. She went missing before the trial could take place. Investigators have found no evidence that her disappearance has anything to do with her testimony. In the years since her disappearance, her family has received numerous tips from people which state that Esther was murdered at a party at the bar on the night of her disappearance. Accounts differ as to how she was killed, but some state her neck was broken, and that she was buried or thrown down a well on a property which was later found to have been rented by friends of Esther's at the time. Cadaver dogs were brought into search and hid on 2 spots but found nothing. Another account states that Esther was struck on the back of the head by a bat or wooden stake. None of the tips have led to any significant finds in Esther's missing persons case. Garcia does not believe Esther even went to the bar that night, since she saw her a majority of the night. At the time of her disappearance, Esther was the eldest of 5 younger siblings, and she had dreams of becoming a beautician when she graduated high school. She was known to drink occasionally, and she also dated older men. Esther previously ran away from home, but she's never stayed away for this long. Esther's disappearance remains unsolved and foul play is possible in the case. There have been reported sightings of her in Colorado and the New Mexico cities of Albuquerque and Farmington since her disappearance, but none have been confirmed, and she's never been found.
Number 5.
Sheila departed from her family's residence on Pliers Mill Road in Kensington, Maryland on March 25, 1975, with her younger sister Catherine, between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m. The girls were walking to the Wheaton Plaza Shopping Center in Wheaton, Maryland, which was approximately 1/2 mile from their home and located on the corner of University Boulevard and Vares Mills Road. It was the first day of Easter vacation from school, and Catherine and Sheila wanted to see the Easter exhibits at the mall, as well as have a pizza lunch at the Orange Bowl restaurant. The girls' 15-year-old brother saw them inside restaurant eating pizza together at approximately 2 p.m. the day they vanished. A friend stated that the girls were walking westward down Drum Avenue near Devon Street between 2:30 and 3:30 p.m. This would have been one of the most direct routes to their home on Pliers Mill Road from the mall, and was the final confirmed sighting of the sisters. Their mother had instructed Sheila and Catherine to return to the residence by 4 p.m. When they did not arrive by 7 p.m., authorities were summoned and an extensive search was conducted. No evidence of the Lyons sisters' whereabouts could be located. Several extortion-type phone calls were made to the Lyon family in the weeks following the girls' disappearances. The most serious call came from an unidentified male on April 4, 1975. The individual demanded that their father leave a briefcase with $10,000 inside an Annapolis, Maryland courthouse restroom. The money was left as per the instructions, but was never claimed. The caller later maintained that police had surrounded the courthouse, and he could not retrieve the ransom. Before the money would be offered to the man again, he was required to show evidence of the Lyons sisters in his custody. The caller said he would be in touch with the family, but never called back. A witness in Manassas, Virginia, reported seeing two girls resembling Sheila and Catherine in the rear of a beige 1968 Ford station wagon on April 7, 1975. The witness stated that the girls were observed bound and gagged in the vehicle at approximately 7:30 a.m. that day. The driver of the station wagon resembled the man seen questioning children at the Orange Bowl restaurant the day the sisters vanished. When the driver spotted the witness tailing him, he ran a red light and sped west on Route 234 towards Interstate 66 in Virginia. The station wagon had Maryland license plates with the possible combination DMT6. The last two numbers are unknown, due to the bending of the car's plate. The known combination was issued in Cumberland, Hagerstown and Baltimore, Maryland at the time. A search for matching plate numbers failed to produce any information. This witness's report was at first treated as credible, but was later deemed questionable by police. In 2014, authorities named Lloyd Lee Michael Welch Jr. and Richard Allen Welch Sr. as the prime suspects in the sisters' cases. Lloyd, who is also known as Michael Lee Welch, is Richard's nephew. He was 18 years old in 1975. Photos of the men are posted with this case summary. Lloyd has a record numerous criminal offenses, including sex offenses against young girls in South Carolina, Virginia and Delaware. Since 1997 he's been serving a 30-year sentence in a Delaware prison. He traveled throughout the United States from the 1970s to the 1990s and worked for a traveling carnival. He was at the Wheaton Plaza Shopping Center the day Catherine and Sheila went missing and was observed watching them. Investigators believe Richard worked as a security guard at the area. Lloyd told authorities he'd left the mall with Catherine and Sheila the day of their disappearances and later saw his uncle sexually assaulting one of them in the basement of his father's home in Hyattsville, Maryland. He told police his uncle and father dismembered the girls' bodies after they were killed, and the remains were taken to Taylor Mountain, 200 miles from their home, and burned. Richard apparently owned property on the mountain in the 1970s, and so did his sister. A grand jury investigation into the children's disappearances began in 2014. Richard's wife, Patricia, testified, and authorities believe she lied on the stand. She was subsequently charged with perjury. In July 2015, a grand jury indicted Lloyd for 2 counts of first-degree felony murder in Sheila and Catherine's cases. The felony was abduction with intent to defile. In September 2017, he pleaded guilty to both counts and admitted to the judge that he participated in the sisters' abduction, although he did not admit to any role in the killings. As part of the plea deal, he also pleaded guilty to 2 unrelated sexual assaults on children committed in the 1990s. Police learned of these crimes while investigating him in the Lyons sisters' case. Lloyd was sentenced to 48 years in prison, and before he begins serving it, he will have to finish serving a prison term in Delaware for the unrelated sexual assault of a 10-year-old child. Given his current age, it's unlikely he will ever be released. Authorities stated there was a conspiracy in the Lyons sisters' presumed deaths, and more people besides Lloyd were involved, but they stated the other suspects were either dead or didn't have enough evidence against them for charges. Lloyd's father died in 1998, and Richard has denied any involvement in Catherine and Sheila's cases. Police found human DNA, and what they suspect was human blood in the basement of Lloyd's father's former home in Hyattsville, but the sample was too degraded to make a match against anyone. Lloyd's attorney stated their client has limited intellectual abilities and was taken advantage of by older adults when he helped abduct Catherine and Sheila. Active searches for the Lyons sisters' bodies commenced in 2014, but nothing has been uncovered. Foul play is suspected in their cases due to the circumstances involved.